Hey everyone, let's be honest. Do you ever feel like you're just dragging yourself through the day? You're getting enough sleep, at least you think you are, but you still feel this constant tiredness, like you're slogging through mud.
Oh, yeah, I think we've all been there. It's like you're trying to run a marathon, but you just ran out of steam like halfway through the starting line.
Exactly. And that's exactly what we're diving deep into today. We're going to try to understand and hopefully even conquer that feeling of just being chronically tired and how it impacts our ability to get things done, our focus, our productivity, even our self-discipline. And our guidebook for this exploration is Peter Hollins' Have More Energy, a blueprint for productivity, focus, and self-discipline for the perpetually tired and lazy.
A long title, but pretty descriptive, right?
Yeah, definitely. And right off the bat, Hollins makes this super interesting point. He argues that if you don't have enough energy, well, it doesn't really matter how many time or money you have.
Right, because you just won't do anything with it.
It's like you've got the map to this amazing treasure, and you've even got the cash for the journey, but your car has got an empty gas tank.
Oh, I get it. You're all geared up, but you're stalled. Makes sense.
And Hollins doesn't limit energy to just physical tiredness. He's talking about this broader kind of energy that includes like your mental and emotional reserves too.
Yeah. It's that inner drive we all need to really tackle anything we set our minds to.
He's got this analogy. Imagine having this super detailed map with all these incredible places marked out, exciting destinations you want to reach. But your car, well, it's sitting there with a big fat zero on the fuel gauge.
Oof, that's frustrating. All that potential, and you're stuck.
And we all know what it feels like when you do have that energy, right?
Oh, yeah. It's like the world suddenly becomes this open playground full of possibilities. You're not just checking things off a list. You're actually enjoying the process of building something, of actually accomplishing things.
But then there's the flip side, which I think is something we all know too well. It's that downward spiral of low energy, where you just kind of feel like, what's the point?
Right. It's easy to fall into those unhealthy habits and make choices that just keep you stuck. And the less energy you have, it seems like, the harder it is to break free.
It's a real trap. And this is where Hollins brings up this idea of multiplying by zero.
Oh, that's a good one.
It's like no matter how great your plans are, how strong your intentions, if your energy level's at zero, you're basically multiplying everything by zero. Nothing happens.
So the first step, before even thinking about fancy productivity hacks or setting those big, ambitious goals, is to make sure your energy tank isn't running on empty. You got to get that number above zero.
Because it's like, what's the point of trying to learn advanced calculus if you haven't even grasped basic arithmetic yet?
Right, you got to have that foundation.
And what Hollins argues is that when you focus on boosting your energy, you're setting the stage for all these other positive changes. You're strengthening your willpower, you're building self-discipline, you're increasing your perseverance. It all flows from that core energy level.
Okay, so how do we start boosting our energy?
Well, Hollins uses this example of wanting to learn a new language. You've got all the apps, maybe some friends who are fluent in giving you tips, but you come home from work and you're completely wiped.
Yeah, I can see how that would make it tough to stick with it.
And the problem isn't the lack of resources or the lack of desire. It's that lack of energy. That's the zero that's multiplying everything else and canceling it out.
Makes sense. But how do we figure out where our energy is going or not going?
So to get a clearer picture of this, he brings in Tony Schwartz's energy pyramid, which is basically this really helpful way of visualizing the different dimensions of our energy.
Okay, break it down for me. What are the levels?
It's a pyramid with 4 levels, and at the bottom, the base, the most fundamental level, is physical energy. That's all about our physical health, how well we're sleeping, what we're eating, how much we're moving. And then the next level up is emotional energy, basically how we're feeling and how good we are at managing our emotions.
So our physical well-being affects our emotional well-being. Got it. What's next?
Above emotional energy is mental energy, our ability to focus, to pay attention, to think clearly.
Right, that mental sharpness we need to really get things done.
And then at the very top, we have spiritual energy. For Hollins, this is about feeling connected to our values, our purpose, what makes our lives meaningful.
So it's this holistic view of energy, right? It's not just about one thing. It's about all these different levels working together.
Exactly. And what he's really stressing is that physical energy, that base level, is absolutely crucial. It's like if you don't have that foundation, the other levels just can't function at their best.
It's like trying to build a house on sand. It just won't be stable.
And that's why he says procrastination, for example, isn't always about laziness. Sometimes it's just a sign that you're running low on energy, either physically or mentally. You simply don't have the fuel to get started.
Okay, so we're not just bags of laziness. That's good to know.
And here's the thing, energy, unlike time, isn't something that just keeps flowing automatically. It's a finite resource, and it needs to be managed, replenished, just like we'd recharge a battery.
So how do we make sure we're not constantly running on empty?
Well, if we want to really perform at our best, to have that mental clarity, to feel emotionally balanced, we need to start with building that solid foundation of physical energy. And that means taking a hard look at how we're eating, how much sleep we're getting, and whether we're incorporating exercise into our routines.
Right, the basics. But sometimes those are the hardest to get right.
Yeah, and I know for a lot of people it can feel overwhelming to make big changes all at once. But Hollins says it doesn't have to be this drastic overhaul. It's about making small, consistent improvements. Like maybe you start swapping out those sugary snacks for something a bit healthier, or you commit to going for a quick walk a few times a week.
Small steps, building up that momentum.
Exactly. And the key is consistency. It's those small positive habits, repeated day after day, that really make a difference in the long run. And once you start seeing those positive changes, it motivates you to keep going.
It's like a snowball effect. One good habit leads to another.
And then, of course, there's sleep.
The holy grail of rest.
We all know we need it, but I think it's so easy to sacrifice sleep when we're busy, stressed, or just caught up in life. But for Hollins, it's non-negotiable. He sees it as this essential biological need.
Okay, so no skimping on sleep. But why is it so important for our energy levels?
Think about it. When you don't get enough sleep, you wake up feeling groggy, your brain's foggy, you can't focus, and you just lack that spark.
And it's hard to get anything done when you feel like that.
But when you prioritize good sleep, you wake up feeling refreshed, alert, and ready to tackle the day. It's like giving your body and mind the downtime they need to recharge and function properly.
It makes sense, but it's still tempting to stay up late sometimes. You know, binge watching that show or trying to squeeze in a little more work.
Oh, absolutely. We've all been there. But what I like about Hollins' approach is that he's not advocating for some kind of extreme sleep regimen. He's just saying, be more mindful of your sleep, make it a priority, create those good habits that will lead to better quality rest.
Okay, that sounds more manageable than I thought. So we've talked about diet, exercise, and sleep. What other practical tips does Hollins give for boosting physical energy?
Well, he's a big advocate for incorporating even short bursts of exercise into our daily routine. He actually specifically recommends a 7-minute morning workout.
7 minutes? That doesn't sound too bad. What's the rationale behind it?
The idea is that starting your day with just a few minutes of physical activity can really jumpstart your energy levels and set a positive tone for the whole day.
So like a warm-up for the day ahead.
Exactly. And the cool thing is, even a short workout can have a bunch of benefits. It releases endorphins, which have mood-boosting effects. It improves circulation, getting more oxygen flowing to your brain and muscles. And over time, it helps strengthen your heart and lungs.
Sounds like a win-win. But why the emphasis on morning?
Well, when you sleep, your body essentially goes into this low-energy mode. And waking up isn't just about becoming conscious, it's about kicking your metabolism into gear, getting your blood pumping, and telling your body it's time to be active. And a short workout is the perfect way to shake off that lingering sleepiness and boost alertness.
It's like sending a wake-up call to every cell in your body. So what kind of exercises are we talking about here? Does it have to be a full-blown gym session before breakfast?
No, not at all.
Yeah.
It could be as simple as going for a brisk walk or a light jog, either outside or even just around your house.
Something to get the heart rate up.
Right. You could also do some jumping jacks, skip rope, do some body weight exercises like squats and push-ups. Even some simple yoga stretches can be great.
So basically anything that gets you moving.
Exactly. The point is to just get your body active and your blood flowing. And of course, always do a little warm-up first. You don't want to jump right into strenuous activity when your muscles are cold.
Good point. Now, you mentioned something called the scientific 7-minute workout earlier. What is that exactly?
Oh yeah, that's a specific routine Hollins highlights in the book. It's actually based on research published in the American College of Sports Medicine Journal. It's a high-intensity circuit training workout that you can do in just 7 minutes, using only your body weight for resistance.
Okay, that's pretty cool. So no need for fancy equipment or a gym membership. What kind of exercises are included?
Let's see, there are jumping jacks, wall sits, push-ups, abdominal crunches, step-ups onto a chair, squats, triceps dips on a chair, planks, high knees running in place, lunges, push-ups with rotation, and side planks alternating sides.
Wow, that's a lot packed into 7 minutes.
It is. But the main idea isn't necessarily to become super ripped or anything. It's more about establishing a baseline of physical activity, boosting your overall energy, and making it easier to do other physical things throughout your day.
Right, like climbing those stairs without getting winded. So it's not about building muscle mass, it's about building energy.
Exactly. And the benefits go beyond just the physical, too. They're also mental perks.
Oh yeah, exercise is known to be good for the brain, right?
In what ways?
Well, for one, it helps improve focus and concentration. It can also elevate your mood and give you a sense of accomplishment, especially if you're making it a regular part of your routine.
It's that I did something good for myself feeling.
Right. And that can really boost your self-esteem and your motivation to tackle other things. It's a great way to set a positive tone for the day.
Definitely beats hitting the snooze button 10 times. So starting your day with a 7-minute workout, even if it seems small, can have a big impact on your energy levels, your mental clarity, and even your sense of self-discipline. Now, once you started to build that physical foundation, the book moves up the energy pyramid to the next level. Emotional energy. And like we've already touched on, our physical and emotional well-being are super interconnected.
Right. If your body's feeling run down, it's going to be harder to keep your emotions in check.
So what exactly does Hollins mean by emotional energy?
Well, he describes it as having this healthy mental state where you're not constantly bogged down by negative emotions. It's about cultivating that inner resilience and stability.
So basically not letting your emotions run the show.
Yeah, it's about being in control. And he contrasts positive emotions like joy and excitement, which actually boost our energy levels, with negative emotions like anxiety, sadness, anger, those emotions that really drain us and zap our energy.
The positive emotions are adding fuel to your fire, while negative ones are just throwing water on it.
Exactly.
So what's the solution? How do we deal with those negative emotions that inevitably pop up?
Well, while we can't always choose what emotions we feel, Hollins emphasizes the importance of cognitive reframing. Basically, it's about consciously changing the way we think about things, about the situations we find ourselves in.
So it's about shifting your perspective.
Exactly. Like, instead of dwelling on a setback and beating yourself up, try to see it as a learning opportunity. Maybe it's a chance to figure out what went wrong and try a different approach next time.
Turning a negative into a positive. I like it.
Another example Hollins gives is about dealing with those feelings of injustice or wanting revenge. He says, a lot of times those feelings come from how we're interpreting the situation.
It's our perception of what's happening, not necessarily the event itself.
Right. And he suggests that if we can try to view things from a more neutral perspective, we can avoid getting sucked into that vortex of negative emotions.
So it's like not letting the situation control your emotional response.
And he also talks about the importance of focusing on the good stuff, even the small things.
Cultivating gratitude, right?
Yeah. Exactly. Making a conscious effort to appreciate the good things in your life, no matter how small they might seem, can really help to shift your overall emotional state.
And he even suggests that feeling fulfilled, even happy, can come from just taking care of your responsibilities.
Oh yeah, there's something satisfying about getting things done, about knowing you're on top of things.
And when you're in that headspace, it naturally creates more energy and allows you to be more effective in other areas of your life.
It's like a positive feedback loop. Okay, so we've talked about building physical energy and managing our emotions. Where do we go from here?
Well, in the next part of the book, Hollins gets into what he calls physical energy vampires. And that sounds kind of scary.
It does, right. But what he's really talking about are those things, those often sneaky things that drain our physical energy, those things that leave us feeling depleted and exhausted without us even realizing it.
So they're like these hidden energy thieves lurking in the shadows.
Exactly. He uses this analogy of leeches or parasites that latch onto us and slowly sap our vitality over time. We might not even notice them at first, but their effect is real.
Okay, that's a pretty disturbing image. But I'm curious, what are some real-life examples of these energy vampires?
He gives a pretty relatable example of someone who's stuck in a job they hate and maybe also dealing with a difficult relationship. They might drag themselves through each day, feeling resentful at work and emotionally neglected at home. And this constant low-level stress and unhappiness can eventually lead to this feeling of being completely drained, even though they might not consciously connect those feelings to the job or the relationship.
So it's not just about the obvious things like lack of sleep or bad eating habits.
Right. Sometimes it's these underlying persistent sources of stress or unhappiness that are the real culprits.
And he even defines fatigue as something more than just feeling tired.
Yeah, he describes it as this heavy feeling in your limbs, a mental fog that makes it hard to think clearly, like you're wading through quicksand. It can even feel like a hangover or that grogginess you feel when you're coming down with something.
And I think we've all experienced that, where it's not just about needing more sleep. It's this deeper feeling of exhaustion.
Right, and when you're in that state, everything just feels so much harder. You're less patient, less enthusiastic, and even simple tasks can feel like climbing Mount Everest.
And the scary thing is, a lot of people try to push through that fatigue, masking it with caffeine or just sheer willpower, instead of actually addressing the root cause.
Yeah, it's like putting a Band-Aid on a bullet wound. It might work temporarily, but it's not a sustainable solution.
And Hollins is really clear about the consequences of ignoring these energy drains.
Mhm.
He says if we keep pushing ourselves beyond our limits, it can lead to burnout, which is not something to take lightly.
Definitely not. What are some of the signs of burnout that he mentions?
Well, besides that feeling of just being constantly tired, he lists things like having this dread of going to work, even when you're exhausted, having trouble sleeping, difficulty concentrating, being forgetful, feeling more anxious or irritable.
It sounds like your whole system starts to break down.
Yeah. And it can even manifest physically.
Hmm.
He mentions things like headaches, dizziness, shortness of breath, even digestive issues.
So it affects both your mind and body.
And what he says is that the fundamental solution to fatigue and to avoiding burnout is rest. And a big part of that is getting enough good quality sleep.
Makes sense. But how do we improve our sleep, especially when so many things can disrupt it?
Well, he dives into the whole science of sleep, talking about our body's natural rhythms, those 24-hour circadian rhythms and the shorter ultradian rhythms. Understanding these is crucial for getting good sleep.
Okay, break those down for me. What are those rhythms exactly?
So circadian rhythms are basically our body's internal clock, like a 24-hour cycle that regulates our sleep-wake patterns, as well as a bunch of other bodily processes.
So it's like our body's natural timer.
Exactly. And this clock is super sensitive to light, especially sunlight. That's why getting sunlight in the morning is so important. It helps signal to your body that it's time to be awake and alert.
And what about those evening hours when we're often exposed to all sorts of artificial light?
Well, that's where things can get tricky. Hollins says that exposure to strong artificial light, especially the blue light emitted from our devices, in the evenings can really mess with our circadian rhythm.
Right, because it tricks our brain into thinking it's still daytime.
Exactly. And that can make it much harder to fall asleep and get good quality rest. So he recommends limiting screen time in the hours before bed. And if you do use your devices, try using blue light filtering apps, or at least dimming the brightness.
Good advice, especially since most of us are glued to our screens these days. What else does he recommend for getting a better night's sleep?
Well, he emphasizes the importance of consistency. Try to go to bed and wake up around the same time each day, even on weekends, to help regulate your body's natural sleep-wake cycle.
So no more sleeping in until noon on Saturdays.
Well, maybe occasionally, but trying to stick to a consistent schedule will definitely make a difference in the long run. He also talks about creating a sleep-conducive environment.
Oh yeah, like turning your bedroom into a sleep sanctuary.
Exactly. Make sure your bedroom is dark, quiet, and cool. Use blackout curtains to block out any light, and try to keep the temperature on the cooler side.
And what about naps? Are those a good or bad thing for our sleep?
That's a good question, and it really depends. Hollins says short naps, taken in the early afternoon and lasting no more than about 20 minutes, can actually be beneficial for some people.
A little energy boost in the middle of the day.
But he cautions against long naps, especially those taken close to bedtime, as those can disrupt your nighttime sleep.
So it's all about finding that sweet spot, the right kind of nap at the right time.
And he also talks about chronotypes.
Chronotypes. What are those?
They're basically our individual biological preferences for when we're most alert and active during the day. It's about whether you're naturally a morning person, an evening person, or somewhere in between.
Oh, like those early birds and night owls we always hear about.
Right. Hollins talks about how it's important to identify your own chronotype and to try to structure your day in a way that aligns with your natural energy peaks.
So work with your body's natural rhythm instead of against it.
Exactly. And he also points out that there's this two-way relationship between sleep and our mental and emotional states. Not only does a bad night's sleep affect our mood, but our daytime experiences and how we're feeling can also impact how well we sleep at night.
So it's all connected.
And that's why he recommends incorporating stress reduction techniques into your day, things like mindfulness meditation or deep breathing exercises. Those can help lower your cortisol levels, which is the stress hormone, and promote relaxation, making it easier to fall asleep and stay asleep.
Okay, so managing stress can help improve sleep. What about our bedtime routine? Does that matter?
Oh, absolutely. Hollins stresses the importance of having a consistent and calming bedtime routine.
So creating those sleep cues for your body.
Right. This might involve things like taking a warm bath, doing some gentle yoga, or stretching, reading a book, or listening to relaxing music. It's about signaling to your mind and body that it's time to wind down and prepare for sleep.
Sounds like a recipe for a good night's sleep.
And if you do find yourself struggling to fall asleep, Holland suggests getting out of bed and doing something relaxing in another room until you start to feel sleepy again.
So don't just lie there staring at the ceiling, getting more and more frustrated.
Exactly. It's about breaking that negative association between your bed and not being able to sleep. And for those who travel a lot and experience jet lag, he mentions melatonin as a potentially helpful supplement.
Melatonin, right, that's the hormone that regulates sleep.
And he also says that occasional use of over-the-counter or prescription sleep aids can be helpful in breaking a particularly stubborn cycle of poor sleep, but they shouldn't be a long-term solution.
Makes sense. So we've talked about the importance of sleep, our body's natural rhythms, and creating that sleep-conducive environment. What else does Hollins cover when it comes to energy management?
Well, beyond our 24-hour circadian rhythm, he talks about these shorter cycles of energy fluctuation that happen throughout the day called ultradian rhythms.
Ultradian rhythms. Okay, haven't heard of those before. What are they all about?
They're basically these natural ebbs and flows in our energy levels that occur throughout the day, even when we're awake.
So it's not just one big energy wave. It's like a series of smaller waves.
Exactly. And the most well-known ultradian rhythm is the one that affects our mental alertness. It's this roughly 90-minute cycle where our focus and concentration are at their peak for about 90 minutes, and then we start to experience mental fatigue.
Oh, wow. So there's a natural limit to how long we can really focus effectively.
And Hollins says that once we hit that fatigue point, our bodies start relying more on stress hormones to keep us going. But that's not sustainable, and it can actually impair our ability to think clearly and make good decisions.
So pushing through that mental fatigue isn't really doing us any favors.
And research has actually backed up this idea of a 90-minute focus cycle. So it's not just some made-up concept.
Interesting. So what's the takeaway here? How should we be managing our energy based on these ultradian rhythms?
Well, Holland says the key is to become more aware of these natural fluctuations in your energy and focus throughout the day.
So paying attention to those times when you're feeling super productive and those times when you start to feel your brain fizzling out.
Exactly. And once you start to recognize those patterns, you can start to structure your day in a way that aligns with those natural rhythms.
So tackling those more demanding tasks when your focus is naturally high and saving the easier, more routine stuff for when your energy dips.
Right. And another thing he emphasizes is the importance of taking breaks. Don't try to force yourself to work nonstop for hours on end.
Because you'll hit that wall eventually.
Exactly. It's much more effective to work in those focus bursts with short breaks in between to allow your brain to rest and recharge. And those breaks don't have to be long or elaborate.
Just stepping away from your work for a few minutes, maybe going for a quick walk, or even just closing your eyes and taking a few deep breaths.
Exactly. Now, finding your peak moments of vitality and productivity is a great strategy, but we all know that life isn't always predictable, right? What about those inevitable interruptions and distractions that seem to pop up throughout the day?
Right, like those unexpected emails or phone calls, or maybe your kids suddenly needing your attention. Those can really throw a wrench in your plans.
And Hollins acknowledges that. But he says, instead of letting those distractions completely derail you, try to plan for them strategically.
So how do you do that?
Well, first, assess the urgency of the interruption. If it's something that absolutely needs your attention right away, then, of course, take care of it.
But if it can wait?
Try to schedule it for later in the day when you're not in the middle of something that requires your full focus.
So prioritizing based on the importance and agency of the task.
Exactly. And the other thing is to try to create those blocks of uninterrupted time where you can really focus on your most important work.
Like setting boundaries, right. Letting people know that you need a certain amount of time to concentrate without being disturbed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And if you find that your current lifestyle just constantly clashes with your natural energy rhythms, He even suggests thinking about bigger changes.
Like a different job or a different work arrangement.
Yeah, something that gives you more flexibility to work when you're naturally most productive. Now, this all ties into this really interesting idea that Hollins presents, which is the concept of visualizing all these factors that affect our energy and productivity as overlapping curves.
Overlapping curves. I'm intrigued.
So imagine a graph where you have a curve representing your natural circadian rhythm, showing your overall energy levels throughout the day. And then you have another curve representing those shorter ultradian rhythms, which are those 90-minute focus cycles.
Okay, I'm starting to see the picture.
And then you have other curves representing your scheduled work blocks, those potential interruptions and distractions, and any high-pressure deadlines you're facing. And Hollins says that by understanding how these curves intersect, you can start to identify your personal sweet spot for optimal productivity and sustained energy.
So it's like finding those times when your energy is naturally high, you have the fewest distractions, and you're able to fully focus on your most important work.
Exactly. And another thing he brings in here is the Yerkes-Dodson law, which describes this relationship between stress levels and how well we perform on different tasks.
Okay, tell me more about that.
So the law basically says that for complex or challenging tasks, a moderate level of stress can actually be beneficial. It can enhance your focus and productivity up to a certain point.
So a little bit of pressure can be a good thing.
Right, but only up to a point. Once that stress level gets too high, it actually starts to backfire, and your performance starts to decline. And interestingly, this effect is more pronounced for those more challenging tasks. For simpler, more routine things, stress doesn't seem to have as big of an impact.
So it's not about avoiding stress altogether. It's about finding that optimal level of pressure that keeps you motivated and engaged without becoming overwhelming.
And then building on this idea of managing stress and distractions, he talks about something called the communication curve, which is based on the work of Cal Newport.
Okay, what is that?
It's basically this idea that while communication tools like email and instant messaging can be super helpful for getting things done, there's a point where they actually become detrimental to our productivity.
Right, because constantly checking emails and responding to messages can be a huge distraction.
And it fragments your attention, making it harder to focus on the task at hand.
So finding that balance between being responsive and protecting your focused work time.
Exactly. And what Hollins is emphasizing here is that our inner energy is finite, and that both stress and distractions have this kind of Goldilocks zone, where they can be beneficial, but too much of either can be really harmful.
So it's about being mindful of those things and managing them proactively. Now, to really tailor all this to our individual needs and tendencies, we need to figure out our unique chronotype, right?
Absolutely. And he talks about how understanding your chronotype can help you optimize your energy levels and get the most out of each day.
So how does he define chronotype?
Well, he draws on the work of Daniel H. Pink, who describes chronotypes as our rhythm personalities, which is a fun way to think about it. It's basically that natural inclination to be a morning person or an evening person or somewhere in between. And knowing your chronotype can help you figure out when you're naturally most alert and focused and when you might need to be more strategic about managing your energy.
So instead of fighting against your natural tendencies, you work with them. Makes sense. What are the main chronotypes that he discusses?
He talks about 4 main chronotypes, starting with the bears, who are the largest group, making up about 55% of the population. They tend to wake up naturally around 7 or 8 a.m., and their peak productivity happens in the morning and early afternoon.
Sounds familiar.
They often experience an energy dip in the mid-afternoon, and they're usually ready for bed by around 11 p.m. They tend to be more extroverted, happy, and do well in traditional work environments.
Okay, what about the night owls?
Those are the wolves, and they're basically the opposite of the bears. They're at their best in the evening hours, often feeling sluggish in the morning. They have their peak productivity in the late afternoon or evening, and they tend to be more introverted and introspective.
Makes sense. So bears should be tackling their most important work in the morning, while wolves should save it for the evening. What about the other 2 chronotypes?
Well, there are the lions, who are also early risers like the bears, but their energy peaks earlier and drops off sooner. They're at their most productive in the morning hours before lunch, and they tend to be very driven and ambitious.
Like the CEOs and entrepreneurs of the world.
Exactly. And then there are the dolphins, who are a bit trickier too.